Hello friends, to another edition of the Think Tank Talk, and today we are going to discuss again Pakistan as well as Afghanistan's current situation, because Afghanistan remains very much a focus of attention of at least of the international think tank community. And the Taliban, they continue generating news, alarming news at times, with regard to women, with regard to terrorism as well. So to discuss this, we have with us, we're very happy to have with us Michael Kugelman. He is with the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars at Washington. Thank you, Michael, to Pakistan.
Great to be here.
So if you could just encapsulate what have been the takeaways for you, having been present at this conference that dealt with security, peace issues, terrorism, I think with reference to Afghanistan.
I mean, I have to say it's been a real eye-opener for me in that as a U.S. analyst, it's very unusual to be in a position in the United States to be able to hear perspectives from China, Russia, Iran, particularly all together. And we had all of that during this conference. So it's been very interesting for me. And one thing that stands out is that yes, I mean, the U.S. is in varying forms of competition and rivalry and confrontations with all three of those countries, Iran, Russia, and China. But there are some convergences, including in the Afghanistan context. Everyone is very concerned about terrorism and the fact that the terrorism threats emanating from Afghanistan are very serious and significant, and of course those in Pakistan would know that full well, but there is a convergence on the terrorism issue, at least between the U.S. and its main global competitors and rivals.
But how does that convergence help all these countries work together as far as proxy terrorism is concerned?
Yeah, well, it definitely doesn't help them work together, unfortunately. In an ideal world, it would, and I think that obviously the U.S. here is the outlier in the sense that it's not a neighbor of Afghanistan. It had the option of picking up and leaving, which it did more than 2 years ago. And so clearly the U.S. doesn't face the immediacy of the terrorism threat in ways that Pakistan and Iran and Russia and China do as neighbors of Afghanistan, or countries that are geographically close to Afghanistan, which means that there's clearly more urgency for these countries than there is for the United States. And I should say that in Washington, the broader perspective on terrorism threats emanating from Afghanistan and Pakistan is that they are largely domestic or regional in nature and not global in nature, which means that from a U.S. perspective, they're not going to be perceived as serious compared to were they to be threats that could project a threat far beyond the region.
I'm very curious about knowing the U.S. perspective on the ISKP, Daesh, as you know, and even TTP, with Tom West recently describing TTP as well as ISKP as the biggest threat to the regional security as well as to the interests of the United States. Now, none of these groups have ever attempted any terrorist attack within the United States, 15,000 kilometers away from the region. So why should it represent a serious security threat to the United States or to the allies of the United States?
Right, I think it's the broader context. Indeed, ISK has never attempted an attack on the U.S., but of course the broader Islamic State, the parent Islamic State, Daesh terror group, whatever you want to call it, certainly has sought to target U.S. interest. And the TTP, I mean, you're right, generally speaking, it's a Pakistan-focused group, but there have been a few cases, including this guy who was trained by the TTP and tried to blow up Times Square a number of years ago. But the TTP, I believe, has publicly declared that it no longer views the U.S. as a threat. So why would U.S. officials indicate that they view these groups as big concerns? Well, these are clearly the most potent, active terrorist organizations in the Afghanistan and Pakistan region. And I would argue that the U.S., somewhat vaguely, for sure, has identified stability as its core interest in South Asia and certainly in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. So when you have these two very potent terror groups operating and committing attacks so frequently, that's naturally going to be something that registers as a concern for the United States, at least in terms of broader interests.
With a keen eye on South Asia, on West Asia, because you are looking after the issues in this region, How would you characterize these terrorist groups? Are they organic groups or are they proxy terrorist groups? How would you look at them?
I'm asked this question quite frequently, and there's always going to be questions about external sponsorship and so on. But I think we have to acknowledge, first of all, that these groups that we're talking about, TTP, ISK, they are very potent and they have significant capacity in terms of arms, money, fighters and all, to constitute a threat simply based on what they have. They don't necessarily need to rely on external actors or external partners, so to speak. Now, that's not to say we can't rule out some type of external sponsorship. And, and this was discussed at our conference yesterday briefly. And I know that Pakistan believes that India provides sponsorship to some of these groups, particularly TTP. And obviously I don't have access to the intelligence. I can't speak one way or the other about it. But I know that in Washington and other Western capitals tend to not have much sympathy for this argument from Pakistan. But it is notable that we had this bombshell allegation from Justin Trudeau that India may have been behind this assassination in Canada, and that might inspire Pakistan to try to essentially get this narrative out a bit more. Its view that India is behind some of these terrorist attacks in Pakistan. I'm not sure if it'll make the West be any more inclined to give sympathy to this view, but the fact that you have a key Western player, the Prime Minister of this country, accusing India of being behind an assassination, which I guess you could call terrorism, that may change the dynamic just a bit. Maybe not, but it is notable nonetheless.
And what about Pakistan as of today? The Pakistan-US relationship, is it still being defined by what's happening in Afghanistan? Is the lens still Afghanistan and counterterrorism?
No, I don't think so. And I think it was clear once U.S. forces left Afghanistan, the U.S. would lose really the key anchor that the relationship had for 20 years. And I think it's been a struggle over the last 2+ years to define new anchors. And this is why I describe the relationship now as a bit uncertain, unmoored, adrift, in that you don't have specific anchors that both sides have agreed should constitute new forms of partnership. Now, certainly counterterrorism is something that both sides view as important, but I don't think this is a key driver. I mean, for one thing, U.S. security aid to Pakistan has been suspended since the early days of the Trump administration. The U.S. has no interest in unfreezing security assistance. And I think that prospects for counterterrorism cooperation are limited if you don't have any U.S. security assistance going to Pakistan. It doesn't mean you can't leave space for other types of cooperation. And beyond that, from a U.S. perspective, trade and investment is what the U.S. would like the relationship to be built around. But that's tough to do. It's tough to move forward on that front when Pakistan is experiencing such a significant economic crisis.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I wanted to come to: Pakistan's economic crisis, Pakistan's political crisis, political instability. And is it the lack of anchors in the United States, in Washington, that has made the US and also its allies, the UK, look the other way? What is happening here on the political front, the persecution, the hunt for the PTI, the way the largest party has been sort of demobilized?
Right. Well, I mean, for me, one of the big secrets about U.S.-Pakistan relations is that, and U.S. policy in Pakistan, is that Washington has never prioritized democracy in Pakistan. I mean, you look at how it's for so long privileged relations with the generals and the senior army leadership. Yes, there have been efforts to strengthen civilian institutions and democracy through initiatives like Kerry Lugar-Berman. But for the most part, I don't really think democracy is a big priority for U.S. policy here. And to your point about why we're not hearing much from the administration about the crackdowns on the opposition, dissent, and so on here, I think it's very simple. Two things. One, there's a desire to maintain a workable relationship with the military. And two, Imran Khan has not won himself many friends in Washington over the years, and I think that the U.S. government would not want to take a position that could be perceived as siding with Khan. And clearly, Khan and his supporters want the U.S. to make more noise about this crackdown on their party and others. And I think the U.S. would be uncomfortable doing that. But you look at the nature of U.S.-Pakistan relations now, I do think that one reason why the U.S. wants a workable relationship with the military and with the country on the whole is to ensure that Pakistan doesn't feel tempted to completely throw in its lot with China. I think that's a part of it. Not to be provocative, but also, if these reports that we've been hearing about Pakistan providing small arms for Ukraine, if that's true, if those reports are true, I think that suggests a very good reason for the U.S. to want to continue to work with Pakistan to ensure that type of assistance could come in. Ukraine is the big foreign policy priority for the U.S. right now.
And then the trade-off, as far as Pakistan is concerned, is democratic rule, the rule of law, political liberties in return for whatever the United States wants and Pakistan going for it?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the U.S. may define its interest in Pakistan based on the need or the support for democracy and so on, but what's said officially might not align with what's actually pursued in private. And this isn't to say the U.S. doesn't worry about democratic backsliding here. Certainly it does. And frequently you do have public statements expressing concerns about minority rights and things like that. But talking specifically about the current situation, the current crackdown on the opposition and dissent, there the U.S. is going to take a different position. I mean, as you well know, the U.S. is very selective about how it applies its democracy promotion policy. You could just look to India at one extreme, where it's very silent. Bangladesh is the other extreme, where it's made democracy promotion the core aspect of its policy toward Bangladesh at this point.
And the China focus, as you say, basically this trumps political liberties in Pakistan.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two separate issues. But indeed, yeah, I mean, there is a desire to keep a workable relationship with Pakistan to ensure it doesn't go fully into the China camp, and that entails not coming out and expressing strong criticism about the crackdowns, because we know who's orchestrating the crackdown. So I think Washington has to be cautious.
Yeah, I mean, that is a dilemma also for a lot of Pakistanis, because the United States has been working so hard to promote the rule of law and political liberties, and there have been a lot of investment also through the INGOs, through NGOs, but then one sees that this uni-focus on China, and then they try to treat everything according to that focus. And because Imran Khan spoke a lot in favor of Pakistan's future being tied to that of China, so it seems that basically triggered this triggers concerns in Washington that maybe Pakistan is drifting too much to China, and hence they quietly agreed to whatever is happening in Pakistan.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I actually sense a shift, particularly in the era of the current Army Chief, which is, of course, he hasn't been here that long in this role. But my sense is that the Pakistan side is trying to convince the United States that it is not interested in throwing in its lot with China, and it does want to have a substantive partnership with the U.S. And of course, the U.S. and Pakistan are allies. It's sometimes easy to forget that, given how volatile the relationship has been. And I think that Pakistani interlocutors, or Pakistani officials, are trying to convey this message to American interlocutors that there is a desire for partnership. And I think that helps explain in part why we have seen a bit of momentum on the defense cooperation. There's been CT dialogues in recent months, the defense dialogue, and of course the Army Chief here spoke with the U.S. Defense Secretary just some days back. So I think that there is, in part here in Pakistan, a desire to sort of move away from this idea that Pakistan's mind is made up. Its close partnership with China means it's a no-brainer. It's just going to focus on that relationship. I think the message is very different coming from Pakistan now.
Thank you very much. Friends, you heard Michael Kugelman. So all we can extrapolate from this conversation that probably sometimes the desire for good relationship, a workable relationship with a particular country can also result in a trade-off, in compromises over critical issues such as the rule of law or democratic freedoms. But that's how the world is, and that's what we need to learn to live with. Thank you very much.